Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I'm wanting to make a discussion video for you on the angle change. So the angle change is a very important aspect of striking that allows us to get off the shots that we're looking for on our opponent during the fight. And it's a way to mix up our game and make things much more confusing for our opponent. You'll see this a lot in boxing. You'll see it a lot in Muay Thai. You'll see it with some of the proficient strikers in the MMA world. There's a number of fighters out there that are very good at doing this. So that's what I want to come at you today with, is kind of breaking down what the angle change is and how to achieve a proper angle change. I made a little diagram board behind me there, and I'll kind of show aspects of that. This video won't particularly contain any footage of me showing or displaying this. I'll save that for another time, maybe like a technique of the week, or maybe I'll add it on to this one. I'm not really sure yet. So that's what we're going to get into right now. So I broke this down into kind of 4 parts. So the first part that we're going to look at is what is an angle change in striking. So an angle change is basically when two people are facing each other. Let's say 2 people in a fight, right? Their hip angles are facing directly at each other. Okay, so when I make an angle change, I want to cut off my opponent's hip angle. Okay, so when we're facing each other, I make a movement that cuts off that hip angle. So now that my hip angle is intersecting his. Okay, so, and that can be at varying degrees. All right, it doesn't have to be all the way perpendicular. Okay, that's obviously probably ideal where you want to be. But sometimes those angle changes are very subtle, okay? They don't have to be very big. All right, the other aspect of that, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the first part that I just talked about, but I want to get to the outside of my opponent's arms, okay? And the reason why I want to do that is pretty obvious. I can't get hit if I'm on the outside of my opponent's arms. So if my opponent is throwing a strike and I've cut the angle and gotten to the outside of that arm, he's not going to really be able to hit me with anything unless he comes around with a spinning back fist or something like that. But usually I'm at a place where I'm pretty safe right there as long as I keep a good high guard. I'm able to clinch from there, I'm able to strike from there, I'm able to take down from there. I have tons of options from that point. And really their only real option is to try to adjust and turn themselves to face me once again so that they can then start throwing their attacks back at me. So momentarily it blocks the opponent from being able to make any attacks and gives me just a small window to get off those really important shots that I'm looking for. Now the second part that I want to get into, and this is probably the most important part, is the footwork. So I got to make sure that I have really good footwork, that I'm very proficient with my footwork, that I'm able to move in and out, side to side, and then learn those more advanced footwork techniques where I'm able to actually shift my angle and get around to the sides and switch my feet, do the switch steps, things of that nature. Another important aspect of that is that I'm able to really condition and strengthen the muscles in my feet. And the reason why that's so important is the feet are the vehicle for my body. So in order for me to be able to fight effectively, I have to make sure that not only my conditioning, my wind, my cardio, everything is good, but that the muscle conditioning in my feet can last me and take me throughout the entire bout if need be, and that I'm able to still move, be sharp, be fast, and have the strength needed so that I'm not sluggish, that I'm not getting slowed down, because that's when I'm going to take more shots, take more damage, and then maybe even lose the fight. So be proficient in your footwork, look to strengthen your feet muscles, and you'll have to kind of find different exercises for being able to do that. I prefer like trail running because not only am I getting the cardio, but my feet have to deal with the terrain that's constantly changing. All right, so my feet adjust to that. It keeps me sharp, keeps my mind sharp, because I have to make sure that I'm able to move and navigate the terrain without tripping and falling and eating the dirt. So that's a good way to kind of strengthen the muscles in your feet, keep your kind of heart rate at a certain level so you're not totally killing yourself, but you're working really hard, and that you can do that for a prolonged period of time. Okay. The other way is just kind of finding like balancing exercises and movement exercises that require you to kind of move and maintain your balance in weird different postures. Okay, there's all sorts of stuff out there that you can find. You'll kind of have to do your own research and your own homework to kind of find the things that work best for you. So in being able to even accomplish cutting the angles and adding that into your repertoire and advancing your striking, you have to have your footwork on point. That's job one. All right, so the third part that I want to deal with is how to achieve a proper angle cut. So this can come in all sorts of different ways. So it really kind of comes down to what's your fight style preference. Are you a counter attacker? Are you an aggressive attacker? Do you like to initiate? Do you like to draw attacks out from your opponent and then counter those attacks? Look at the kind of different ways you like to attack and then how you can incorporate the angle change into those types of fighting styles. So a big part of that is going to be obstructing your opponent's vision. So anytime I'm initiating an attack or I'm countering an attack and my opponent has to deal with a combination, that's going to present an opportune time for me to cut the angle on him and continue my attack. So if my hands are in his face, he's having a hard time seeing. One minute I'm in front of him, and then the next minute I cut the angle on him and I'm not there anymore, and then he's having to deal with an attack from the side. That's a really good angle cut. That's an awesome time to get that angle cut. Now the parts that I have to worry about are my range and my timing. So I can't use the angle cut just by itself. Like I can't be facing my opponent and then just try to cut an angle on him and then hope that I'm gonna get the attack off. It's like anything else. If it's jiu-jitsu and I want to get my submissions, I have to set up that submission. So I have to be thinking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. If it's striking, I need to be able to use my jab, use my combinations, do it off a counter attack. I have to set up that angle cut so that when I do get that angle change, I'm able to get those shots off that are really important and really count. Or if I want to use that angle change to get the takedown and take the game to the ground. There's a number of different things. I can use the angle change to get the clinch and change the game completely. So it all depends on what I want to do, but that angle cut, if timed right and at the right range, gives me all the options I need for a split second. So like I said, my options are endless for maybe a second, if that. And my opponent's options are completely nullified until he's able to get turned back around into me. So when you're practicing cutting the angle, you want to make sure that you have the right setups, but you also want to make sure that when you're cutting the angle that you're able to maintain the proper range. Okay, so you have to stay within the right distance. If you're cutting the angle but you're getting way out too far from your opponent, then that angle change was useless. If your timing is off and you try to make that angle change, it could be countered. You could be seeing that coming and he's gonna make the adjustments needed, and then he'll continue his attack and continue to initiate and cause damage. So it's very important that when you're practicing these things that you're able to drill to the point to where you know the setups that you like, you know the range that you like to be at, and you know what attacks that you like once you make that angle change. Now the last part is probably the two most common ways that you're going to see a striker attack. So there's the penetration style or the probing style of attacking, which is all my attacks are very linear. I go in and I come back out. I go in and I come back out. Maybe I'll kind of change the angles that I'm moving, but as soon as I get the kind of angle that I like, I'll move, boom, and I'll come back in. So it's very penetrating. It's coming in with 1 or 2 shots and then moving back out and getting back out of range. The other type of style is what we call riding the train tracks. Okay, so I'm using those angle changes and I'm cutting and I'm moving in kind of a U shape around my opponent. So as I'm throwing my combinations, I'm constantly changing my angles and I'm moving back and forth, kind of rotating around. We call that riding the train tracks. And both are very effective and can be used by themselves. But once you start getting into more higher level opponents that are much more experienced, just using one or the other isn't really a great tactic. So with the penetration style or the probing style, it's easy to use. It's very easy to move in and move back out. You see that in like the point sparring, the taekwondo, the karate styles. They move in with their attacks and they move right back out. The other benefit to that style is that it uses less energy, so it's a lot more cost efficient in trying to get those attacks off that I'm looking for. The problem with it though is that it's one-dimensional, so it's easier to time and counter. If that's the only way that I'm fighting my opponent, where I come in and I move back out, it's a lot easier for my opponent to download that information and to start to find the attacks that I like to use the most and to anticipate those attacks and then counter them. So it's not very sufficient alone once you start dealing with higher level opponents. Riding the train tracks. So I get all the benefits of the angles when I'm able to get those angles. It gives me a lot more versatility in my attacks, and it causes a lot more confusion with my opponent. So when I'm throwing my attacks, my combinations, and I'm overwhelming my opponent, and I'm constantly changing the angles, that can be a lot harder for my opponent to deal with. Now the problem with this is that it uses up a lot more energy. So depending on kind of what strengths and weaknesses you have, cardio might not be an issue for you. You might be able to ride that train track and keep attacking, and when you find the angles that you like and you get going and you're moving back and forth and back and forth, you might be able to sustain that. For me, I know that's not something that I can do. I have to do it in spurts. So when I'm fighting my opponent, I have to find the right times that I can start throwing my combinations, cutting those angles, and trying to get those shots off and deal damage. So that's not something that I personally can sustain for long periods of time. So I got to make the shots that I can get off really count. The problem with this too is that in order to be able to ride the train tracks is you have to set it up. So just trying to do that alone doesn't really work, you know. So it can't really operate by itself, and that's kind of something that is common on both aspects. So what I'm getting at basically is that they need to be incorporated together. So you need to find ways to use your probing attacks to initiate and set up your angle changes, and then moving into riding the train tracks and then back out, probing, hitting, finding the spots that you like, finding the setups that you like, then moving back into the riding the train tracks. So not only do we have combinations with our strikes, knees, kicks, elbows, clinches, takedowns, those can all be worked together into combinations. So we have certain combinations that we like. Well, this is just another aspect of those combinations. So it's how I'm doing those attacks. So I can probe, angle change, and continue to mix everything up to make for a very hard mixture of attacks for my opponent to deal with. So what I'm gonna do now is just kind of go over that again on the board back here. So I'm gonna kind of change the camera angle and then just kind of show you guys what I got written up there and kind of summarize the video. All right, so we're gonna kind of see how this goes, but I don't have hands free, so I'll do my best to kind of hold the camera steady. So I guess kind of the first part that I want to gravitate towards is this aspect right here. So right here, all I'm showing two opponents facing each other, okay? And these angles that you're seeing, these V shapes that I created, that's just the hip angle that I was talking about earlier in the video. And right inside this hip angle here is the pocket. So this is where both me and my opponent can exchange strikes and do damage to one another. So what I want to do when I create that angle change is what you see down here, where my opponent's hips are facing one way and my hip angle has cut his off and is creating kind of a perpendicular angle to his. So I've cut the angle here. So when I'm in this position here, this momentarily cuts off his ability to attack. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve when I cut the angle. So now this aspect up here, oh gosh, that glare is awful. All right, this aspect up here, this shows the penetration of the probing style. So this is my opponent up here. You're showing straight, very linear attacks, right? Moving in, moving out, moving in, moving out, moving in, moving out. Now there are angle changes within this. You'll see I drew it all at different angles, right? So I am able to move and kind of create angle changes within that, but my attacks are still primarily very linear. The second part here just shows the U shape moving around my opponent. So this is riding the train tracks, right? So as I'm throwing my combinations, I'm using my footwork to move around and back, around and back. So I'm able to throw combinations while I'm using my footwork to move and change and create those different angles. So I don't think that these should be used one or the other by themselves. I think as you develop and grow and your striking game gets a lot sharper, a lot better, that you should start bringing them both together. And I had mentioned that earlier. So a couple notes that I wrote down here: can't use only by itself on experienced fighters. Use penetration style attacks with angle change, or with the train tracks. Use the two concepts together when drilling your combinations. So that's all I wanted to cover for the video. So just to kind of summarize one more time, the 4 different parts that I broke it down into: what is the angle change, your footwork, making sure that everything is really sharp, that you have the strength and the conditioning to take you into those later rounds, how to achieve the proper cut, and the penetration or the probing style versus the train tracks, and then using them in conjunction with one another. So I didn't do any sort of display of cutting the angles or the angle changes. I will make a video in the future where you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about, and actually probably sooner than later. Now that I've made this video, it would probably benefit not only myself but you guys to actually see it be displayed and demonstrated. So thanks for hanging with me on this video. This is my first discussion video. All the videos I've made so far have been technique of the week videos, which I really like doing because they're a lot simpler. But these are cool. Obviously this is where my heart is at, is in the discussion videos, because this is where I can really get into the details of things. For me, it's just figuring out how exactly I'm gonna create a process for these, because sitting in front of a camera and just talking to myself is a lot harder than I thought it would be. So I'm kind of getting that figured out. But this part's really cool. This is where I feel like things can get really creative, and I'll start merging not only this discussion aspect, but I'm gonna need to actually create demo footage with it to kind of show exactly what I'm talking about. So expect these videos to get better as I grow. But thanks for checking out the videos. I hope this was helpful to you guys and kind of brought some inspiration, or kind of intrigued you in one way or another. So I hope I had something for you. So stay tuned for future content coming out soon. I've got a bunch of stuff on the plate right now that I'm looking to get out, so it's just a matter of finding the time to film it and making sure that it have good enough quality to post for you guys. So all right, I'll see you again soon.